Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article is about plane crash at Kozhikode in Kerala. An Air India flight with about 190 people on board crashed at Kozhikode in Kerala. This happens to be the first flight crash after the year 2010 where a similar incident had happened in the Mangaluru airport. The flight skidded off the tabletop runway and fell into a valley, breaking into two portions. In this backdrop, we have to understand what is this tabletop runway. Let's look into the image to understand what is this tabletop runway. A tabletop runway, as shown in the picture, is nothing but a runway built on the hill, or it is built on a plateau, or it is constructed by chopping off the top of a hill. So when you have a runway which is built on a plateau or on a hill, that is what is called as the tabletop runway. It is located on top of a plateau with one side or on both the sides having the steep faces. As you can see in the image, it has two steep faces on either side. It can be one side or it can be on both the sides as well. At the end of the runway, what you also have is a cliff-like or a valley-like gorge as shown in the picture. So this is what is called as the tabletop runway. So a tabletop runway is essentially the one which is built on a hill by leveling the surface as given under this image. It becomes very tough for all the pilots to land on the tabletop airports. That is because of the cliff that we have at the end of the runway. If there is a cliff, it becomes very challenging for the pilots. Why? Because pilots need to understand the right landing spot, failing which the flight can overshoot this particular runway. So what they have to make sure, they have to calculate where exactly they will have to drop this particular aircraft, and in case it does exceed the runway, it may ultimately fall into the cliff, and that is what has happened in the present scenario. So landing on the tabletop runways requires accurate precision from the pilots, and this cannot have any room for errors when it is being landed. Moreover, it can also create an illusion when it comes to the cliff area as they are dropping the aircrafts down into this runway. Owing to the safety issues, some of the larger airlines like the Airbus A330 or the Boeing 777 are not allowed to land on these airports because these aircrafts will require a longer runway. This is the general scenario. But what exactly happened in Kozhikode was because of the bad weather conditions. One is because of the rain. So what happens when it rains? When there is excessive rain, water starts clogging on the particular runway. So when there is water on the runway, what it will prevent is friction. So when there is less friction, obviously means there is more movement on this particular road. That becomes the major issue. The second is also because in that particular region there was excessive wind as well. Because of excessive wind, this also means that the touchdown happened at a higher than usual speed. The pilot was not able to understand and control this particular speed. Both these scenarios led to this aircraft falling into the valley. Now let's go back to the year 2011. There was one of the reports called as the Aviation Safety Report submitted to the Ministry of Civil Aviation in the year 2011. According to this report, ideally there was supposed to be 200 meters after the runway. So this is where the runway stops. So after this particular runway, what it had suggested was that this distance should be about 200 meter. But what is currently present is at about 90 meter. This might have also caused the issue, says this particular article. Ideally, after the runway point ends, you also need some distance which is prescribed as per this particular notification is 200 meters. But in the present scenario in Kozhikode, what we have is just about 90 meters. This is another problem that the article speaks about. Another issue, similarly on both the sides of the runway, what we actually see is this distance to be about 75 meters. But what was recommended was about 150 meters. So if this was present, maybe we could have prevented this particular incident from occurring or some of the issues. Also, we have to remember there are other tabletop airports in India as well. This includes Mangaluru, Lingai Airport in Mizoram, Pangyong Airport in Sikkim, and Simla and Kulu in Himachal Pradesh also have these tabletop airports. Why did we discuss this issue? That is because GS paper 3 has two important subjects. One is economy, the other is disaster management. From the economy perspective, we need to know where are the airports that are present in the tier 2 cities. And from the disaster management, in case there is an issue with respect to the aircrafts and loss of lives, what is that the government of India will have to do, and how is that we have to bring changes to stop this particular issue from occurring. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about landslides. What is the context? At least 18 persons were killed and about 52 others were missing after a series of landslips at Nayamakad Tea Estate at Pettimudi near Rajamala in Idukki district. In this particular backdrop, we have to understand why landslides have been occurring in Kerala, what have been the various issues, and what is the steps that we have to take to mitigate these issues. First, we have to understand what is a landslide. Let's suppose there is a high region. So high region is persistent in that region, and when there is movement of rocks or soil down this high region into the lower region is what is called as landslides. This is the movement of the material from a higher elevation to a lower elevation. Why? Because of the influence of the gravity. What triggers these landslides? In the present scenario or in the past as well, intense rainfall has what has caused landslides in the state of Kerala. So when there is prolonged and high intense rainfall, this can trigger landslides in the regions. Added to this is the deforestation. We are all into the areas where we had previously not been. We are entering into the forest areas. So forest areas usually prevent these landslides. Why? Because there are deep rooted trees in this region. Because we are into deforestation where we are chopping off the trees, this is also adding to the flight of the landslides, and the major problem is because of the human intervention. The human intervention is because of the deforestation, and as a result what we are also constructing is resorts in these areas, also tourism hotspots in these regions where ideally they should not have been constructed. Adding to this is the quarrying business that is taking on in these areas. What is quarrying here? Basically it is extracting useful material, that which is required for the building construction like the stone and so on. So the quarrying business has also increased in majority of the landslide prone areas in Kerala. So this quarrying as a whole causes some rapid landscape changes, and that is ultimately causing these landslides. This is in general with respect to Kerala, but there can also be other scenarios as well when there is seismic activity or there is mining activity, or recently you've also witnessed a volcanic eruption in that region. In all these scenarios, once again, landslides can occur in a specific region. So the landslide season in Kerala usually starts with the onset of the southwest monsoon season every year. After this starts off, landslide includes the debris flows, rock falls, rock slides, and mudslips that happens in Kerala. So what is the impact? The impact is very devastating. The major ones is loss of the innocent people's life, and this also leads to loss on the economic front as well. One, you have the human losses, and two, you also have economic losses where the hill tracks, the agricultural lands, and in fact houses are also immediately destroyed. There was one of the report that was released in the year 2016, and that is the disaster management plan. According to this disaster management plan, all those landslide prone areas are those places where the construction activities have increased, and adding to the flight of these landslide prone areas is the changes in the climate change, which is also increasing the flash floods as well. So because climate change is also bringing massive changes, and there is introduction of new variations and the human interventions like the construction of the resorts is adding to the major problem, says the disaster management plan. So what is that we have to do? We have to make sure that all those incidents, activities that trigger the landslides should be strictly regulated. Therefore, we need to regulate and prohibit unscientific constructions, regulate the land developmental activities, and functioning of the quarries in these landslide hit area should also have to be regulated. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article is speaking about recent elections that was witnessed in Sri Lanka. We are clubbing all the three articles here and we will have an elaborate analysis with respect to India and Sri Lanka's relationship. What exactly is this whole article about? Recently we witnessed the parliamentary elections in Sri Lanka. There are about 225 parliamentary seats, and out of these 225 parliamentary seats, one of the major political parties represented by the president's brother, and that happens to be Sri Lanka's People's Freedom Alliance, has won a thumping majority of winning about 145 seats, and they are very close to having an alliance with other regional partners, and once they hit this 150 number, they would be able to bring major changes into the constitution of Sri Lanka. This is what this article all about. First, what we have to understand is how were they able to win this massive majority? That is because of the number of achievements. What exactly is the reasons behind the landslide victory? Majoritarian nationalism. This was also boosted by the unprecedented disarray in the opposition ranks. One is that there is Sinhala majority and they were able to appease to the Sinhala majority, and at the same time the opposition ranks is not able to take on the Rajapaksa brothers, and that is the primary reason they were able to get this thumping majority in the parliamentary elections. The previous regime was also marking with a lot of corruption issues. They were not able to provide good governance to the people, and ultimately they suffered because of weakening economy as well. One, there is excessive corruption, good governance was lacking, and this also depreciated the economy very badly, and as a result people were wanting to throw the previous government and bring in the new government. Adding to the problems is the Easter bombings. What exactly happened? We did from India side also give intelligence that there could be a possibility of bombings in Sri Lanka, but the government in this particular political alliance were not able to have any nexus, or there was not understanding between the president and the prime minister in the previous regime. Because there was no understanding between the president and the prime minister, this led to the heinous act of Easter bombings. This led to number of people losing lives as well, and that is why the majority right now, the Sinhalese, felt that the government were not able to protect the people. There was security deficiency in the region. As a result, they had to throw out the opposition led by President Sirisena, and they had to bring a new president as well as the prime minister. Followed by this, Sri Lanka is also armed by impressive public health sector. Currently we have the coronavirus which is impacting every major country, but in the present scenario Sri Lanka is able to bring a stop to the coronavirus. The number of cases are comparatively less because he was able to control it. The president and his brother, that is the prime minister, were able to control it. They have given a thumping majority to the Rajapaksa brothers. That is why they have 145 seats in the 245 seats parliament. Now comes the concerns. What we have to understand is, in case they get this 150 number, for sure they'll be getting it. So in case and after they get, what could be the possible repercussions? They have the president with them, that is their political party has the president, and they also have the prime minister. But to bring a change in the constitution, they require about two-thirds of the majority, and that recommends about 150 seats. In case they have this two-third majority, they'll be able to bring massive changes with respect to the constitution. One of the important changes is with respect to the 19th amendment. What is this 19th amendment? Basically, Sri Lanka has what is called as executive president. This was present since the year 1978. So to bring an end to the powers of the president, they came up with one of the clauses in the 19th amendment that the president would be able to become a president only for 2 terms. So first term, and after the second term he cannot stand or contest as the president. This was one of the important introductions in the 19th amendment. In the near future there could be a possibility where this second term or 2 term limit can be removed if they have the power to actually make amendments to the constitution. And at the same time, the amendment had also drastically reduced all the powers that were given to the president, and they were also given independent charges to number of committees. Let's take for example, we have the public service committee, we have the police committee, we have the judiciary committee, and election commission in Sri Lanka. In all these commissions, they were able to act independently. Why? Because the 19th amendment prevented the executive president to interfere in all these committees' actions. They were given independent charges. But in the near future, if there is two-third majority, the powers could be reinstated to the president, and ultimately there could be a fall of checks and balances between the executive, the independent bodies, as well as the legislature. That is the major issue in case they are able to bring changes with respect to the constitution. The amendment has also reduced the arbitrary powers of the president and has also restored the parliamentary democracy. Now, what we have is the powers being redistributed between the president as well as the prime minister. But in case they are able to bring changes to the constitution, again, we will have one of the presidents, or there can be consolidation of powers only between the president and the prime minister. In the present scenario, the Rajapaksa brothers, and they would have all the say, and other independent organizations and committees and other bodies will lose their independence is the major concern. All that we discussed right now is with respect to Sri Lanka. If they are able to make changes with respect to 19th amendment, how is it going to change the scenario with respect to Sri Lanka? But this will also have impact on India as well. How India? Let's say there is another important amendment called as 13th amendment. This was also what gave to India Lanka Accord. What is this 13th amendment? Basically, you have number of people from the Tamilian origin who are situated in the northern part and in the eastern part of Sri Lanka. Initially, they were not given any of the powers. They didn't have any of the legislative backing. They were not able to govern themselves. They were not able to have independent charges in this particular country. Why? Because the brute Sinhala majority was completely dominating over the Tamil minority. So there was majority and minority differences, and that is where the legislative powers and other autonomy and independent powers were not given to the Tamil minority. But what happened? Then came the 13th amendment. This also was part of the Indo Accord as well. So what happened under this particular issue is that this 13th amendment said that they will resolve Sri Lanka's ethnic conflict. How ethnic conflict? By granting some of the self-governance for the minorities. What is the issue right now? Some of the politicians who are actually linked to this particular regime have also questioned this 13th amendment, are also planning to bring changes with respect to the 13th amendment. In case it is diluted, in case there are changes that are made, what this will result is the breach of India-Lanka Accord, and ultimately Sri Lanka would be violating international treaty obligations with respect to India. It also increases the minority discontent. Already what we see is that there is brewing discontent among the Tamil minorities in Sri Lanka, who are majorly occupying the northern part as well as the eastern part of Sri Lanka. In case these changes are taken away, this would immediately increase the minority discontent. In case this minority discontent increases in Sri Lanka, this will have a spillover effects in the southern part of India, especially in the state of Tamil Nadu. Why? Because we from the side of India have a cultural link with Tamilians who are present in Sri Lanka. In case there is any discontent, there will be spillover and people will start moving to India through the sea, entering the state of Tamil Nadu. This will have a major problem for India, and as a result there will be tensions in Tamil Nadu, where we have linguistic and cultural affinities to the Sri Lankan Tamils, where there is strong affiliation for the language. Hence Sri Lanka and India's peace stability is substantially affected in case there are changes made to 13th amendment. Previously, when Mahinda Rajapaksa was the president, he had not respected the views of the Tamil minority. In the present scenario, where he would be the prime minister and his brother would be the president, will they respect the views of the Tamil minority is another question that we have to answer, which we have to wait and watch as well. Adding to the problems is this particular issue where India and Japan were planning to jointly develop the Easter Container Terminal. Mahinda Rajapaksa, as interim prime minister, had also endorsed the announcement made by his brother, and that is with reference to taking off this particular particular project from the hands of India and Japan. This could be another issue that which would happen in the near future. Sri Lanka also recently shelved off Japan funded Colombo light railway project, and it has also withdrawn some of the projects which was given to the United States of America. Does this all mean that they are linking all their projects to China and they are becoming the voice of China? In case they are becoming the voice of China, our presence in Sri Lanka can be very tough and we will have issues with Sri Lanka, are some of the arguments and concerns with respect to India. In the past, when similar incidents or India has issues with Sri Lanka, what India did was taking an economic approach. It was trying to pump in as much money as possible so that Sri Lanka does not drift away from India and fall into the lap of China. What has been the economic approach? Let's look into the numbers as given in this article. Between 2013 and 14, what we have actually seen is an increase in the amount given by India to Sri Lanka. In the year 2012 and 13, it was about 2.48 billion Indian rupees, and this was increased to 4.20 billion rupees in the year 2013 and 14. 4.99 billion rupees was spent in 2014 and 15, and in the year 2015 and 16, it was about 4.03 billion. So whenever there has been a presence of China, India has considerably increased the amount given to Sri Lanka. But in the year 2016 and 17, the amount considerably dropped. Why? That is because we had Sirisena as the president of Sri Lanka, and he was considerably close to India, and Vikramasinghe, who was also the prime minister, was assumed to be very close to India. So that is why there was drop when it comes to the lending to Sri Lanka. So in the year 2016 and 17, the amount was 990 million rupees, and this considerably dropped in 17-18 to the amount 770 million rupees. And again in the year 2018 and 19, it increased, and in the year 2019 and 20, it further increased to about 2.5 billion rupees. Why? Because this is also a period where they were trying to get close to China. There was Hambantota port where they were planning to have some additional agreements with respect to China. So whenever there has been China which is interfering or engaging more with Sri Lanka, what we have actually seen is that India is pumping more money into Sri Lanka. So going forward, India cannot expect that Sri Lanka would reduce its economic and commercial engagement with respect to China. They will continue to have their engagement with China, but we should not be haunted by it. What should India do? India will have to strengthen its ongoing engagements, enter into all the agreements and treaties where China is not currently engaging with respect to Sri Lanka. There could be certain areas where Sri Lanka and China have not entered into any sorts of agreement. These areas is where India will have to identify, invest money into, and pull Sri Lanka towards itself. We need not be haunted by this particular agreement between China and Sri Lanka, but instead we have to find out areas where they have not entered into an agreement and we need to start investing. So the limited presence that China has will have to be taken into picture by India, and more investments and economic approach will have to be taken forward by India. So this will help India to strengthen its political capital in Sri Lanka and thus reap the benefits of economic approach. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the National Handloom Day, which is celebrated on August 7th. First, we have to understand why National Handloom Day is celebrated on August 7th. That is because of the historical significance. Back in the year 1905, what we actually witnessed is the Swadeshi movement, where there was partition of Bengal, and as a result of partition of Bengal, there was a call given by the freedom patriots back then that we have to be Swadeshi. We do not have to import clothes from other countries, and all that we have to do is use products which are built in India. So we became one of those countries listening to the call of the freedom fighters, where Swadeshi products were taken into picture, and that was the day where the proclamation was made, and that happens to be August 7th. So because the proclamation was made in 1905 on August 7th, and majority of the people did listen to it, and they started using Desi products and Desi clothes, handloom clothes. That is why after 100 110 years, what we have in 2015, the Modi government called this as the National Handloom Day. So the National Handloom Day has the significance with respect to the Swadeshi movement. Now let's look into the definition of what is this handloom industry. In 2012, a definition was proposed, and that is handloom means any loom other than the power loom and includes any hybrid loom on which at least one process of weaving require manual intervention or human energy for the production. It basically made room for a relaxed entry for the power loom weavers. So what is loom here? Loom is nothing but a device used for weaving the fabric. So this was the definition that was released by the government of India back in the year 2012. Let's take some of the examples to understand what is this handloom weaving. We have examples of Kanchipuram saris from the state of Tamil Nadu, Assam's Muga golden silk, and we also have Mekhala sadors, Paitani weaves of Maharashtra, Benarasi brocades of Uttar Pradesh. These have been some of the examples where handloom comes into picture. But this particular scenario, when we consider, we also have to look at what have been the various issues for reduction when it comes to the handloom sector. There are a number of issues that we have to consider. First is with respect to the raw material. When you look at cotton or silk or wooden yarn to dyes, costs have increased considerably with respect to the raw material, and as a result number of people are leaving this particular sector of handloom. So what are they doing? They are leaving this particular number, and as a result there is reduction in the number of people who are employed in this particular sector. Why are they reduced? That is because the raw material prices have increased and they are also finding limited number of opportunities in the handloom sector. So now they are looking for new jobs in the city level. They are moving from the rural areas and entering into the urban areas. Why? Because they are working as laborers in the urban area. The institutional credit that these textile weavers should also get has been decreasing considerably, and now they are under the influence of the money lenders. So because they charge exorbitant interest rate, that is another reason why these people are moving away from the handloom sector, are also entering as laborers in the urban areas. Further, poor infrastructure, older looms and inaccessibility to the primary market to sell their products is also making them leave the handloom sector. So what is the way forward? We need to create awareness to the people. We also have to provide institutional credit to these people. More R&D has to be taken, easy access to the raw materials, and their cost will also have to be reduced so that this particular industry, the handloom industry, survives in the near future in every nook and corner of the country is what we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about increased cases of poaching when it comes to the leopard. There was recently one of the studies conducted by Traffic. According to this particular study, they have said there is increasing case of killing the leopards. Why? One is for their skin, 2 is for their claws, and 3 is for their bones. So because there have been illegal activities that are conducted, what we see is death of these leopards. Kindly remember, the IUCN status of the leopards is vulnerable. Where are the cases of poaching more? This is in the state of Uttarakhand as well as in the state of Maharashtra. And when you look at the numbers, according to the previous census, it is about 12,000 to 14,000. This may be the number, but it is comparatively less is what they also say. What have been the other threats apart from the poaching, where they have been poached for the skin, they have been poached for the claws, teeth and bones? What have been the other threats with respect to the leopards? They frequently enter outside their protected areas. They leave the forest areas and enter into those areas where humans are present, and as a result what we see is increasing cases of human animal conflict, which is also killing these leopards. Habitat loss is another major problem. Why? Because they mostly thrive in the grasslands. So because there has been excessive deforestation and there is habitat loss for the leopards, this is also another reason for the decline in the leopard population as well. And third is with respect to the prey depletion. all these issues have led to drop in the numbers is what this article all about. So what is the recommendation? More emphasis will also have to be given for the conservation of all these leopards as much as we conserve the tigers in India. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice question. Loya Jirga, a special type of Grand Assembly, is practiced in which country? Is it in Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, or Afghanistan? The answer to this is Afghanistan. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So the Loya Jirga is called as the Grand Assembly or a legal assembly. This was present before the government was actually present. So what happens? Let's say there is a leader, there is sudden death of the leader. In case there is no leader, the group or the Grand Assembly would come into picture and they would elect a particular leader when there was no democracy in picture. So this is basically a traditional code of laws of the Pashtun people. It brings together the elders, the community leaders from across the land to also discuss some of the major issues that which is of national importance. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which state in India is said to become the first coastal state to declare Sonatia alba as the state mangrove tree? Is it Gujarat, Odisha, West Bengal, or Maharashtra? The answer to this is Maharashtra. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, it is also known as white chippy in Marathi. Why did Maharashtra take this measure? That is because they wanted to conserve the mangrove trees and also bring about conservation of the soil tolerant vegetation. The Sonachia alba is one of the important evergreen mangrove trees occurring in the coastal districts of Maharashtra. Maharashtra already has the state tree mango, state animal giant squirrel, state bird green pigeon, state butterfly blue marmon, as well as state flower jarul. In the past, UPSC has asked questions with respect to butterfly. That is why it becomes very important in the present scenario. The article here further makes a mention of Arabian Sea humpback whales. Let's look into some of the facts. The humpback whale is one of the 4 species of baleen whales occurring in the Indian water. The Arabian Sea humpback whales are the only sedentary whales in the world. What do we mean by sedentary whales? They are the ones who usually feed and breed in the same area. But when it comes to the other whales, they usually travel across all the oceans. Only the Arabian Sea humpback whales are sedentary because they stick to a particular sea area. The IUCN Red List categorizes the species of humpback whales as least concern, but it has also recognized the distinct Arabian Sea population as endangered in 2008. What have been the various threats with respect to this Arabian Sea humpback whales? They get entangled in the fishing gear, shipping including shipping strikes also disturb them, and at the same time oil and gas exploration and potential leaks of oil have also killed them in the past as well. Now let's look into the next practice question. Kavkaz 2020 Strategic Command Post exercise is to be conducted by which country? Is it Saudi Arabia, Russia, Japan, or China? The answer to this is Russia. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements with respect to Eravikulam National Park. It is the national park located along the Western Ghats in the Idukki district of Kerala. Lakom waterfalls is in this region. Eravikulam is famous for the natural habitat of Nilgiri Taha. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is 1, 2, and 3. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, all the 3 statements that are given are correct with respect to the Eravikulam National Park. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to inflation in India, which of the following statements is correct? Controlling the inflation in India is the responsibility of Government of India only. This is wrong. The Reserve Bank of India has no role in controlling the inflation. This is wrong. Decreased money circulation helps in controlling the inflation. This is right. Increased money circulation helps in controlling inflation. This is wrong. So the answer to this is C only. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Discuss the major causes of landslides in Kerala and suggest mitigation techniques. Next question. India has to strengthen its ongoing engagement with Sri Lanka to prevent new political challenges from surfacing. Analyze. Please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review. Come up with constructive criticism. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.